Today, we are looking at unique stories, and my guest today has a story for us all. It's overcoming obstacles, to say the very least. I'm going to introduce you now, coming to us from Houstan, Texas, all the way over there. Hot over there as well, he tells me. Heat wave over here at the moment. Give it up for my friend, now yours too, Jerry Fu. Jerry, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good, Caiman. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure, man. When I heard your story after you got in touch on the email and everything, I was like, yeah, I need to speak to this guy. We need to talk about this. We need to get this out there. Often I like to have people on who've achieved something in life or got over some sort of obstacle. And to say the very least, I think you've gotten over some sort of obstacle. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm stronger for it, for sure.
Yeah, good man, good man. Well, that's great. That's a positive message there, you know. I think it goes back to the old cliche, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so how's life over there, first of all, before we delve in, shall we say? Things going all right for you at the moment?
Yeah, I'm grateful for what we do have. Houston the COVID cases have gone down, thankfully, despite a chunk of people who still refuse to get the vaccine, and you just have to deal with that. And then, it's been good to see people trying to resume pre-COVID levels of activity, even as we showed discretion doing it. So Houston summers are terrible. There's no surprises there. It's super hot. And then, lots of rain to compensate for that heat. And then it's just very extreme.
I dare say.
But yeah, grateful for, what the city offers in terms of culture and the community that I have here. So yeah, doing okay.
Brilliant, mate. We're glad to hear it. Is the COVID situation back on its feet over there now? Have restrictions been lifted completely, or is there still a little bit of red tape to get through?
What's funny is, the governor had actually lifted all mask restrictions earlier. So there's technically no official state mandated or city mandated restrictions, but individual companies can still enforce rules as they see fit. The funny discrepancy for me is to say, just to observe that a lot of companies say, well, hey, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. And I'm just thinking, but no one's checking. So It's like, all right, guys.
This is it. Where'd you draw the line there,
Honor system, yeah.
I'm
a fan of it, really.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're in good health. Brought you here today mainly to talk about the story of past. Shall we just jump into that and get started? So you were, from my take on it, you were held up at gunpoint. Is that right? Yeah, it's in a pharmacy. So just talk us through it, man. Obviously, we want to know when this was, where this was, what you were doing there, what happened, and we'll pick pieces out as we go along.
Oh yeah, no, you're gonna love this. This is easily one of the most requested stories among parties and friend groups in pharmacy. They're like, Jerry, you got to tell the robbery.
Well, I'm glad you're still happy to tell the story, and I'm itching to hear it, as will be our viewers and our listeners. Over to you, my friend.
Sure, man.
What went down?
Yeah, no, happy to recount it, just because it's one of those, truth is always stranger than fiction. You're just like, there's no way he could make this up. And it's just like, believe me, I wouldn't. I haven't been creative since Legos. So, I'm not that.
Lego, there's a blast from the past.
There you go. Absolutely. So basically, the situation was is that in the middle of my career roller coaster, I was working for a smaller independent chain of pharmacies. And so this was in April of 2012. And keep in mind, I had the day before I'd gotten back from a pharmacy friend's wedding. And so, the company that had hired me, it was early stages, money's tight. And so I knew I had to make a relatively good impression on, in the few days that I had started there. And so on this Monday, it was a couple different moving parts. And so in one front, the corporate team from Dallas, which is about 4.5 hours north of us, was in town and said, hey, we're going to try to drum up some business. And I said, all right. So they go into the medical center, where MD Anderson is, big med center where, hey, we're going to, try to shake some hands and try to see if we can drum up some business for you. I said, okay, that's fine. So on the meantime, we had a retired Department of Public Safety officer who actually wrote most of Texas narcotics law doing an audit at our store. Basically, what happens is this store that I was working for, they tried to specialize in pain management. They said, okay, well, there's normally a lot of high risk, activity with these kind of medications. You're scrutinized by the DEA. So we're going to bring in this guy and make sure that we stay legit. So Johnny is, in our store working on things, checking things. And so while I'm at lunch, all right, so keep in mind, this is about 1:15 in the afternoon. I'm in the back room, oblivious to what's going on out there. All I know is there's pharmacy stuff. And so it's me and two other technicians. And then all of a sudden we hear bang, and we're like, okay, what was that?
A gunshot or?
Basically, yeah. Well, because after we heard bang, bang, we're like, okay, those are gunshots. So we were like, okay, let's get underneath the table. And then I'm like, I need to finish this pair.
Yeah. How old are you at this time, Jerry?
32.
32, yeah.
Yep. So I'm like, I need to finish this pair. I start noshing on this pear because I was ready to clock back in for lunch, and my technicians are like, why are you eating this pear? And I'm like, it might be the last thing I eat. I don't know. Like, you're just trying to separate yourself from the gravity of the moment. So, okay, well, what's one thing I can focus on? Let me try eating this thing. And so we're hearing things outside, in the front of the pharmacy. And, we go out there, and it turns out, and I'll rewind, from the beginning, but basically we saw as we were being escorted out by deputies that Johnny had shot a guy who tried to rob us at gunpoint. And so we're just like all being escorted out the front as we see this corpse lying on the floor, And so basically, it took a couple days for us to kind of get back to normal. And so in the process of the research of finding out exactly what happened, this is how I'll set up the whole story. In that we have an older security gentleman named Jimmy. Okay. Jimmy's like, shaved head, hokey glasses, like old guy glasses.
Yeah.
Just, like the first time he met me, he actually bowed. And I'm just like, what are you doing, Jimmy? Like, what? This is the kind of character he is, right? And even weirder was the fact that Jimmy, so in the process of, trying to keep patients safe, he would escort them to their cars. This pharmacy was not in a good area of town. And so the weird thing is that Jimmy would advocate for patients' complaints. Like they would walk back in if he was upset, and he would be like, why is this patient's copay so high? And we're like, Jimmy, we're not paying you to be their friend. We're paying you to keep us safe. Right. And so anyway, so this day where we were in the process of getting robbed, it turns out that this was the guy, basically set to put some context there. This is a guy that we had previously turned away for doctor shopping. And by doctor shopping, I mean he went to multiple clinics faking the same symptoms to get the same kind of medications.
Okay.
And so, he tries to come to our pharmacy to get these medications filled. We have there's a monitoring program that checks, and we say, hey, you've seen, 3 docs for the same symptoms in like 3 days. Like, this is not legit. We're not going to fill your prescriptions. So apparently this day he decided to take the drugs by force. If he couldn't take them by deception, he decided to take it by force.
Right. Okay. Do you remember what it was he was after exactly?
There's a specific combination of medications that's known as the Houstan cocktail. That's a combination of hydrocodone and Soma and Xanax. And so for those of you who aren't immediately familiar with those names, basically the point is that these drugs give you a high that is very popular.
Okay.
And so basically they want to get high. Either they do it themselves or they sell more on the street, to keep their own lifestyle going. It's a lovely network. Really, it is.
I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And, it's the doctors who write these clearly are not worried about jeopardizing their medical licenses, even though, clearly it's not for legit purposes. But you know what? It's their decision. I can't stop them. I certainly can't. And anyway, so this guy, on this day, it was drizzling slightly. And so Jimmy had a poncho on. And as Jimmy is walking back to the pharmacy after escorting a patient, the robber sneaks up behind Jimmy and just grabs his sleeves right behind him. So it's just all of a sudden, chirp, and Jimmy is now a hostage. And it's like, congratulations, Jimmy. That's all it takes. So,
literally, that's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it takes. And just like, you were already pretty useless, and now you're useful to someone, but not us.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, the robber comes in with Jimmy and comes into the pharmacy lobby. And there's two plastic windows where our cashiers sit. You know, like the rest of the pharmacy is only accesses like a door with a keypad lock in the front. And so he points the gun at one of the girls and he's like, "Let me in." And so, of course, you know, they don't want to get their faces blown off. So they're just, okay, let the guy in, right? And plus Jimmy has a hostage. So I'll do my best to verbally describe this. So the pharmacy is basically a giant rectangle, right? And so if you're stepping into the pharmacy from the robber's view, on like your 10 o'clock or maybe even 9 o'clock is a giant gun safe that has all the medications of interest, okay? And like about 11 o'clock in the far back, there's an office where my manager is sitting with Johnny, the compliance officer. To your right, you have the cashiers that let you in, and in the far back right, you have Wayne, the ex-Marine Vietnam vet pharmacist who has no filter. Nice guy, just no filter. Okay.
I like those people.
Yeah, right. No, he's fun. He was fun to work with. I miss him. and so anyway, so immediately the robber figures out, okay, drugs are in there. He's probably the pharmacist. I need to talk to him in order to let me in to get to what I want. So anyway, so the robber pushes Jim up to Wayne, and Jimmy, of course, restates the obvious. It's like, "There's a robber here."
No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, and Wayne just laughs at him. Okay, Wayne's just like, he's like, "Jimmy, you can't joke around like that." And the robber, to quote him verbatim, is like, "I'm not fucking around, man." Like, and so jams the gun into Wayne's ribs and pushes him over to the safe, right? And as Wayne is like getting in place, he's like, "Oh man, okay, man, okay." So the gun safe is about maybe 5 feet tall. Like, it's a fairly big safe.
Yeah.
Okay. And so keep in mind that as the robber is going over to the safe for Wayne to open it, he sees my manager and Johnny sitting in, my manager's office, and he's like, "Hands where I can see him." And they're like, "Oh." And so as Wayne opens the safe door, it kind of obscures the robber's view of Johnny and my manager. And so as Wayne is starting to open drugs or empty out the safe to get what the robber wants, and Jimmy's just useless in the corner, just just hands on his head, and Wayne's like just trying to stay calm. And so Johnny, the thing with Johnny, he's great, is that he has a holster on his left ankle, which he proceeds to reach down discreetly to reach for his gun on his left ankle, pulls it slowly. And as the robber's still distracted with Wayne's work in terms of trying to get drugs out of the safe, Johnny runs up and then pow, right, hits the guy, shoots the guy in the chest, but the guy's wearing Kevlar, of course, because he came prepared. And then so the guy like stumbles and then like drops the gun, and Wayne's like trying to crawl for it as the robber's trying to crawl for it, and Johnny pow shoots again, still hits him in the Kevlar. And basically the guy's still, even though he's kind of in shock, he's still trying to kind of recollect himself. And then finally Johnny shot a third time, went for mass, and somehow the guy bled out on his side and died. And so all this in the span of about 15 minutes. And so, we come back and we're escorted outside, and then corporates come back from the med center, and they're seeing like everybody outside, deputies everywhere. And they're like, what's going on?
What the hell is going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a tough moment. So just to other fun stuff regarding that story. So Wayne, being a Vietnam vet, had his PTSD triggered as a result of it, and needed
I dare say you did.
Needed about 3 weeks of counseling before he was back to normal, and even then he really wasn't quite back to normal. And so anyway, but this is one of those moments. People are just like, "Jerry, I can't believe you're eating a pear in the middle of all this." And it's just like, you know what, I'm not the hero, I'm just telling you what happens, and here we are.
Yeah, man. Well, so they say when these things occur, you'll remember exactly where you were, what mindset you were in, what you were doing at the time. So I think the pair is quite relevant, really, in this story,
Absolutely.
So you said it was Wayne, did you say? Was Wayne, the one who had the PTSD after?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
So did he return to work after this then?
So he did. So to let you chase down this path. So yeah, Wayne did his best to be back to normal. He seemed he was okay, but he also he started carrying a gun to work like afterward, and
yeah, just in case sort of deal.
Yeah. But the breaking moment when we realized that he needed a different work environment was apparently there was some patient who was being extremely difficult and complaining about something about her other cost is too high or things like that. And then you heard Wayne go, if she says one more word, I'm going to have to do something about this. And we're like, all right, we're going to have to get HR on the phone. Basically, this next bullet's for her. You're just like, oh, okay, that's that cannot happen.
Yeah, it gets a little scary then, doesn't it? A little unpredictable, yeah?
Yep. It's one thing, people can have their stance on guns. I'm not here to get in the way of people's opinions, but there comes a point where you're just like, okay, like even we would agree that's a little too much.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how did, obviously it's not something you go to work thinking you're going to be a part of this, in fact, it's the last thing you think you'll ever be a part of, I'd imagine. And certainly the last thing you'd ever want to be a part of. I mean, granted, it makes a great story, but talk us through, all right, you've told the story, but inside your mind, inside your heart, how were you feeling at the time? Did you ever think to yourself, oh my God, this could be it while you were going through that? Or were you too busy concentrating on that pay?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to ask myself some harder questions after that one. So to give some context, like my job situation was already starting to get kind of rough because in pharmacy, from the time that I'd started, it was great because there aren't that many schools, there were more than enough jobs, and you almost had this inflated sense of ego because I just kept getting mail and calls from recruiters being like, hey, come work for us. Do you have a license? Do you have a pulse? Yeah, come on, we'll throw some benefits at you. Here we go. And I won't lie, it gets to you. You're just like, oh man, I'm in high demand, and
well, it would.
I have my pick of the litter, right?
That's right.
Then but the funny thing is, so about 5 years into my career, right at 2010, like supply started to catch up with demand. A lot more schools started opening, and all of a sudden, right, like people weren't as interested in my services. All of a sudden they're like, hey, grads are cheaper. They're willing to work for less money than what you're used to. And so even if you have leadership experience, like why would we want to pay that? We'd rather just boss around, hungrier people, right? They're going to be
Why would
grateful.
you want to be? Because you get what you pay for at the end of the day,
Yeah, preach, man. Tell me about it. And so basically when I moved from Tennessee, where my family was, down to Houston, it was a much tougher market. And so, having been fired from the job I moved to Houston for, I scrambled, I dealt with bounced paychecks at the job in between that job, the first job and this one. And, I just thought to myself, what am I going to do? Because this is one of the few jobs that my friends were kind enough to help me get. And now we have a giant bullseye on our back, not only from the DEA, but from robbers, and other, the drug diversion scene in Houston knows. They're like, oh, this pharmacy has what we need. If we can't get it by deception, then we're going to take it by force.
Yeah, take it by demand.
Yeah, right. It's just kind of like, well, even you're just thankful that they don't like rob you directly. You're just like, well, at least they broke in and just like, gutted the place while we weren't here. At least just no one needs to die over this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, it made me wonder. I was just like, and that you search for that stability, you search for that, steady paycheck to feel like, okay, I'm doing something good. But, it was a really harsh reality as to where pharmacy is, where he just said, hey, dispensing medications is not a long-term solution. Like people keep cutting into your margins, and then people are going to try to steal your stuff. Like even if you don't have a lot of what they're looking for, like my pharmacy, my current employer, at one point we got broken into because it's that perceived value. They're just like, well, if this is a pharmacy, surely they have something, and they just come in and they just try to take what they can. Even if they're disappointed, you still got to clean up after that. They don't take anything. So definitely had a crosswords. Absolutely crosswords.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it, though, how people get that desperate to literally put people's lives on hand, put people's lives at risk, their own lives at risk as well. Because look at what happened here. It's all there, it's all there in the story. But But so did you return to work the next day? And if you did, were you all given some form of counseling and whatnot? Or
Yeah. So thankfully, the next day, for the people that were on site for it, they said, "Hey, like we'll have a skeleton crew here, um, you know, and we'll just they'll handle things. So you're not obligated to come in, if you don't have to." And yeah, like even the CEO came down and was like, "Hey, yeah, we're going to make sure that you have all the resources you need to really process this whole incident." So I mean, yeah, I thankfully, it meant a lot that the company was willing to do that for us because, when I dealt with the previous robbery attempt when I worked for a chain pharmacy, like we barely got anything. In fact, they told us to keep the drive-through open even after we got robbed because that technically wasn't part of the robbery scene. And it's just kind of like, man, yeah, I can go over that one too if you're curious.
wow,
But
yeah, well, you go right ahead. Let's feed into that. What happened there?
Sure, man. Yeah. So this was another. In hindsight, right? You look at this and just kind of like, man, I can't believe this whole thing. So, this other time was in '09, and this is when I was still living in Tennessee. And so, if you remember, there was a really bad economic crash in '08, right?
Yeah.
So people people get in some really desperate thinking when there's a recession, right? And so from what we could tell, because there's a rash of robberies on chain pharmacies, for whatever reason, people just went on a streak around that time, at least where I was living. And I think the only mentality they had is, we're bored, we're broke, let's go rob a pharmacy.
And get high. Yeah.
Let's get some adrenaline in us and let's go get some cash because we need this. And it's like, okay. So this other attempt was, it happened on a Monday evening, like right around Memorial Day weekend. And basically, the cops call this note point, and that guy came up to the drop-off counter, hands my tech a note saying, "This is not a joke. I have a gun in my pocket. I want you to empty out, I want you to give me the following drugs, and no one has to know, no one else has to know that you're being held up. Just be very discreet. Just give me what I want. No one gets hurt, basically." And so from where I was kind of ducked down behind the counter where the safe was, because this was a smaller safe and it was kind of obscure from the guy's view, so he couldn't really see what we were doing. And so, the tech's looking at me and I'm looking at her. And keep in mind, the rest of the people in the pharmacy have no idea what's going on. So we got old people at the, checking out at the front counter, the drive-through is still going like full speed. And so we're just like, oh my gosh, does anybody else have any idea what kind of trouble we're in right now? And so I'm like, all right, in my own mind, the only thing I could tell myself was, the more I stall, the more likely, the better chance of a better outcome. And so my text says, yeah, I'm going to sneak off and try to call 911, which of course she couldn't do in the warehouse section of the store because, cell signals are terrible.
No signal. Yeah, awful.
You're like, I hate Sprint. I'm never going to use them again because I can't call 911 while we're being robbed. All right. And anyway, so I empty out the safe and I'm like, okay, 2 at a time, just 2 bottles at a time. 2 bottles at a time, and hopefully that will be slow enough for the cops to get here before this guy does anything crazy. And I hear him yell out, "You're taking too long!" And I'm like, "I'm going as fast as I can!" Right? And so I'm just like, "Well, okay, OxyContin. I'm getting you everything you want. If you want it, it's gonna take a while, right?" And so anyway, at one point, he gets really agitated and he's like, I'm gonna count, from 10. And he's like, he starts to count down. Another text behind me, and we're all just like, uh-oh. And then he gets down to 1, 3, 2, 1. And we're like,
yeah, is something supposed to happen at 1?
Yeah, we're like, okay, did he jump the counter? What's he gonna do? Right? And then nothing. And then I sit down and I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm just like, I look up, he's gone. It's like, okay. And thankfully, this happened. This was around 7:30 at night, right? And so anyway, the detective shows up. She starts talking to us, asking us for things. We call in the manager because it was his day off, and that's what came back down to the drive-through, because they're like, Chris was asking. He's like, Chris wants to know if the drive-through is part of the crime scene. And keep in mind, we're open till 11 at night, so I was already like exhausted, and I was like,
I bet, they'll take it out to you.
I hate evening shifts, and so about 7, I'm just like, let me just go home, right? And Chris Chris, let's keep the drive-through open. And we're just like, are you serious? Like, okay, fine.
Jeez, who cares about the freaking drive-through?
You know, and this is what this comes back down to, right? Like, what are you robbing? Like, you just like, do you love people and use things, or do you use things and love, do you love things and use people, right? And so this is one of those moments you're just like, clearly you don't care about us.
Absolutely
like,
not.
Yeah, the bottom line, yeah, I get it. If you don't have the bottom line in place, you can't pay our salaries. But man,
yeah, it's kind of an extreme situation, though, in an extreme set of circumstances where, I'm sorry, you've got to bend a bit, it's potentially people could have been killed. People have gone through a traumatic experience. They're not real. Work is probably the last place they're going to want to be, let alone where they've just been a part of, a potentially fatal robbery.
Yeah, and we pretty much.
But hey, let's keep the drive-through open, right?
Yeah, no, we put up a sign. We're just like, hey, we're not doing any business the rest of the night because we were robbed earlier, and so we would just hear cars pull up and then drive off, and we're just like, yeah, they'll understand. They'll just come back tomorrow. It's fine.
That's it. Yeah. So two robberies, man. Two robberies. What's the chances?
They keep going up, really.
Yeah. It just makes you think about life, doesn't it? And just like what's important. Like you said there, do people love things, or do people love people? I don't know if I worded exactly how you worded it.
Yeah,
but
I can say it again. Do you love people and use things, or do you love things and use people?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's like, it sounds to me like two different sets of circumstances in those two robberies there. The latter being the better result, I think. So did this or these events change you as a person at all? Did they change your way of thinking at all? Have you been looking over your shoulder a lot more, sort of thing, or?
Yeah,
because I know I would be.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's it made me realize I want to get out of the commodity business.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy a warehouse and store stuff and try to move it. That's partly why I wanted to get into leadership and conflict resolution coaching, because it's a whole lot easier to move information and, coaching services, and no one's trying to break into your house, right? On some level, success does breed liability, and, someone may still sue me. And so at least, hey, they're not trying to break into my house because they're like, hey, you got gold and I want your gold. So
exactly. That mentality kind of sucks, doesn't it? So on a fluffier note, you're also into your music. You're a musician as well. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. I grew up.
Tell us about that.
Sure, man. I joke about this, but it's true. My parents signed me up for piano and violin because every Asian parent signs their kid up for some kind of instrument. The funniest commentary I heard was that there's a lot of clarinet players because the clarinet is the cheapest instrument for Asians to get their kids starting on. I said, oh, that is too perfect. I guess my parents were more generous with me. I get two instruments. Oh my goodness.
Hey, spoiled rotten.
I know, right? Yeah, no, parents got to get that ROI for sure. And so, I was classically trained. I tell people, I think my piano teacher would have a lot easier time inspiring me to practice if she just gave me music I was actually excited to learn.
Yeah.
I tell people, I'm like, just give me the Van Halen sample from, right now. That was man, I would love to learn that.
Awesome.
Yeah, right. Chopin finally did it for me. I said, wow, Chopin is really beautiful. I want to learn to play that. Mozart is fun. Brahms is fun. But, and this isn't to take away from my piano teacher's vision. And she's like, hey, you got to learn all this contemporary Russian stuff too. And it's just like, oh, really?
Yeah. They always start you off with something dodgy, don't they? But it's like when I was starting to learn guitar and everything, I just wanted to play so the guitar solo of Wasted Years and Iron Maiden. I remember it, and it's like but I never ever learned that. So I guess that's what you call an irrelevant story, really.
It's okay.
But yeah, it's they never start you right where you want to go. But I suppose there's a goal, something to aim for yourself. Then they give you the tools, and then it's up to you how you use them, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah. I think for me, the nice thing is sometimes it's good not to know when to quit. And just like, I didn't know, I could tell my parents I wanted to quit. And, so the only way I was able to quit was when I said, Mom, my academic studies are taking are too heavy for me to focus on instruments. And they said, nope, studies first. And that's,
you got a green light then.
Yeah. That's the only time you're allowed to quit is if like my grades are in trouble. Like, oh, you better focus on those. It's like, okay, good. Yeah, and tip to all the Asians out there. Anytime you want to quit something you don't like, just tell your parents you want to focus more on your studies.
Yeah, play the academic card. Yeah, it works every time.
Pretty much.
So are you still musical at the moment? Do you still pick up the instruments or?
Oh, thankfully, yeah. So that journey. So the funny thing is, when I moved back to Houston about 10 years ago, I just happened to live with people who had keyboards. And so I just fool around on them every once in a while. And the nice thing is just having perfect pitch. I would try to figure out songs by ear. And so, when I figured out Bohemian Rhapsody and other things like that, and I said, okay, now we're talking because I'm learning things that I want to play and not just because my teacher wants me to. And so while I'm not, I wouldn't mind getting some more paid gigs for sure. At one point a friend had suggested I trying to get some wedding reception gigs and things like that. And I didn't. I wasn't that serious about it, even if I can make it available now. But I mean, I do appreciate being a musician just for the fact that it opens up a whole different world of, how to look at things and how to interpret things and, just knowing the craft and talking with other musicians that people can appreciate, what comes with that. I don't know how much you listen to Postmodern Jukebox, but when you hear the founder's story of how, initially his parents tried to sign him up for piano lessons and then he just didn't practice. And then the teacher conveniently wrote him out of her schedule. But then he discovered Rhapsody in Blue by Gershwin. And then all of a sudden, that's all he wanted to do is learn how to play the song. And his parents are like, we don't understand, that you didn't sign up for the lessons that we gave you, but now we can't get you off the piano. And so, music is a wonderful thing. I hope everyone takes the long road and plays the long game and realize, what? I do want to learn the guitar. There's a lot of fun stuff to play out there that I can enjoy and share with others. Absolutely.
Most definitely. It's a powerful thing, definitely, especially in times like we've just been through lockdown and everything. I mean, I first picked up the guitar when I was probably about 10 years old. I could play a couple of little bits on one string, one of those guys,
That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I put it down then and I didn't pick it up again until I was about 32 years of age. And then I started learning. Then it was like, all right. And again, you're talking about learning by ear. I was just like listening. It's like, right, I learned the chords first. And then it's just like, right, don't get me wrong. I'm no Jimi Hendrix or anything, I'm just an acoustic guy who'll get the guitar out in the party. I write my own stuff as well, comedy songs as well. I wrote one about panic buyers during lockdown. It's an interesting song. It's just going through a big shopping list basically, and then telling people to stay in and watch their TV, or the longer they don't, we're not free. But it's just finding something that motivates you, and that's when I think with music you really get the fire in your belly, so to speak. When you find that one thing that clicks with you, really.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You found your niche, right? Like, I mean, Hendrix can only go so far, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So talking modern day now, so obviously you've been through an ordeal. You're a bit of a musician as well. What are you doing with yourself at the moment then? So what's going on in the world of Jimmy Foo right now?
Basically it's kind of after COVID hit, it's just kind of, the current four silos are day job at pharmacy, side job, getting my coaching business off the ground. Somehow I managed to, meet a girl in the middle of COVID, and then, salsa dancing and other, fun restaurants in the little time that I have left. And so otherwise, I like to read a lot of interesting books on self-improvement and other stuff. And so, it's just fun to learn from other people, and just getting on these podcasts and meeting all sorts of neat, fun people. So that's kind of what's my current spectrum is. That's what it looks like.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Do you want to talk about the coaching business? What's the situation? How did you get into that, and where are you hoping to go with it?
Excellent. Yeah. So that actually ties back into the pharmacy story.
Right. Okay.
Back then. So back to 2012 now, the company, despite this trauma, I said, well, I don't have a lot of options. I got to be faithful with what they're giving me. Not a lot of hours, but it's still enough to pay my bills for the time being, until I get a call about a month later, and they said, hey, we like you, but money's tight to the point where we can't pay you more than 8 hours a week. So one shift a week. And I'm like, okay.
That'll pay the bills, right?
Yeah. I get to choose between rent and groceries this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had to ask myself, okay, well, what do I do? And they said, well, our Austin store needs help. And so if you want more hours, you can go work in Austin, which is about 2.5 hours away for those of you who don't know the geography. And so the weird thing is, it's just funny for me because by now Houston started to feel a lot like home. And even though Austin is not the worst place to end up because, lots of fun things to do there. It's a metro city. And, I was just like, I don't want to leave home. That default to comfort and familiarity, right? There are people like, you could end up in a lot worse places. And I said, that's fair, but I still wasn't,
home is still home.
Yeah. And so I said, well, okay, I guess I'm going to go to Austin. And so I go work in Austin. I don't get a permanent place. I just, bum rent. My company is willing to give me a stipend. And so I just basically, instead of giving me 3 nights at an extended stay place each week, which is useless because what would I do the other 3 days, right? Like I just said, hey, I have friends there. I'm just going to pay them rent with the same money so I can actually not have to move my stuff out every 3 days, just to keep moving around. So so I'm out in Austin and I'm working and I'm like, I have no idea what life is going to look like because I have no idea what kind of job opportunities I could move to in Houston, anything like that. I wasn't that well connected yet. And so that summer, I got an email from some friends of mine who run a leadership nonprofit through the pharmacy fraternity that I'm a part of. And by now, I had been facilitating workshops on the fraternity side for other topics, but never the leadership side. And so leadership for me, for a while, I was like, oh, leadership is hard. I could never be good at it. And it's that fixed mindset, right? Like musicians early on, right? You're just like, oh, this is hard. I don't think if I could ever be good at it. And so same thing with this. And so the interesting thing is when you start teaching this material, right, you start to look at it a different way. And at that point, having seen these leaders I respect and studying how they motivated me and motivated others, I said, well, I turned on that possibility. I said, well, what if I could be a good leader? What would that look like? What kind of work would that involve? And so later that fall, I had the opportunity to either stay part-time in Austin, which was a great team. Like it was a great work setting, even though it wasn't home, or I could take on a full-time manager position in Houston. And part of me by now, I said, I can't afford to stay safe or comfortable or be passive. And I want to come home. So I'm going to take on this manager challenge. Yeah. And so I came home, tried, struggled, failed. I struggled to fire people. I struggled to confront people. And then, ended up getting, like corporate got mad at me because I wasn't keeping my people in line. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get good at this? And so anyway, after enough hard knocks, you just get stronger and you're just like, okay, like I can't afford to tolerate this anymore. And so the funny thing is I got better, but then, like the company had its funding pulled actually. And so, the investor said, okay, after enough robbery attempts and DEA drama, like this is no longer sustainable. So we're just not going to deal with it anymore. And so I said, I was already unhappy from being written up. So I was just kind of like, and I was already fishing around trying to find other jobs. So I was like, as much as my friends struggled to tell me the bad news, just like, hey, so this boat's going to, sink pretty quickly. I was just like, well, it kind of makes things a little more urgent, but not that really. I was already looking. And so the funny thing is that the only reason I got a job interview with the next company I ended up working for was that I had this managerial experience under my belt, because he's like, oh, we don't want someone who's just been staff for 10 years. That just shows they haven't challenged themselves. And I said, okay, thank goodness. So that was a good decision to take on that challenge.
Well, so that worked out well, that bit then, yeah.
Oh yeah, though that was a good decision. I'm so glad because and so I ended up eventually getting hired, and then sad thing is 11 months later that job failed because it just wasn't a good business model. They struggled to get. They was working alongside a doctor's clinic. They weren't capturing as much business that they would have wanted, and then the margins were terrible. So it was just kind of like, we can't keep this up. And I was like, okay. And so I'm just basically what I'm getting to is the fact that leadership did save my career, because I wouldn't have had job options come to me unless I'd taken on this experience. But then I was still hopping from iceberg to iceberg, right? So it's just kind of like, hey, great, more icebergs. And it's like, okay. And so there was the company after that. I worked for about 2 years, and that was really fun. And that was a nice little season. But at the end of the day, as long as insurance dictates what you make off certain medications and they basically dictate your worth, Like it's just they can shapeshift the playing field any way they want, and that's just really the most frustrating thing. And so 4 years ago, when my previous company went under, I said, well, I'm tired of begging doctors for scripts. I'm tired of fighting insurance companies to stay open. What am I really about? And so I said, well, I really love teaching these leadership workshops, and I know how much I wish I had someone to develop me as a leader when I grew up. What if I turned around and did that for other people? What if I could make a career out of that? And so I said, well, yeah, let me try declaring myself to be a coach. And so it's a nice idea until you realize that you have no idea how to build a business, open a business, run a business.
Yeah.
And I was too scared to even kind of plant my own flag or get my own skin in the game. And so people will be like, oh, you're a coach. That's great. So do you have a website? And I'm like, yeah, I have this free WordPress website. And it's just, you just see the air just like, just out of their sails, right? They're just like, oh, you're bootstrapping a little too close to the ground. Good job. And so some friends were kind enough to give me some business because they knew I was, even if I didn't have the structure in place, like they knew I was pretty good at what I was doing. And then ironically enough, COVID hit, and then it was like, okay, all these things I've been procrastinating on, I have no excuse now because I have all this time. I can't go work out. I can't do this, but I'm just watching more than enough Netflix, right? And then, you said, okay, I go through this, I get some certifications, I work on this, and then, okay, October, fine, do it. Just, rip the Band-Aid off, power through, open up the business bank account, get the website up. And, it's been terrifying, Cayman. I'm not going to deny it, right? When you're working for yourself, because, from a pharmacy standpoint, right, I'm used to just being like the operator, where it's just like other people go out and find business, they give it to me, I process it, and that's my role.
You deal with your bit and the rest just happens around you. Yeah.
Pretty much. And then now it's like, which hat do I wear today? Like, when I don't have any cash flow, where do I find money? I am so confused. And so, yeah. And then everyone's like, hey, take my course, $1,000 will help you solve all your problems. And then you're like, I've fallen in a couple of those traps. And you're just like, all I know is I feel better about myself. And yet I still haven't solved my problem. So it's like, okay, do things, get out there, make the ask, try things, see who responds, see who pays. And just try, struggle, fail again, and just allow for that possibility, right? In the same way, oh, I could never be a good leader. Oh, I could never be a good businessman. It's like, okay, well, can you? Will you? Are you willing to experiment with that? And so there are some good things in place. And the main thing that's been fun is just recognizing, hey, like for the podcast, it's been fun, man. It's just like, what?
I can relate so much to that.
Yeah. And it's, you're just like, oh my gosh, right? No stakes. If they don't like me, too bad.
That's it. Exactly. It's 30 minutes, 45 minutes of your life, if not, and who cares, But no, I think a point you made there, I think is relevant to many. A lot of us pretty much talk ourselves out of our dreams. Talk ourselves out of what we are capable of doing, and we often miss out, not because of things that other people do, but more so because of the things that we don't do, if you're with me,
Absolutely.
I think if you've got an idea, if you're passionate about something, and if you're thinking about that something, whatever it may be, and if you're thinking about it a lot, then to me that says you need to be involved in that, So whether that's coaching, whether for me, I wanted to be a pro wrestler, so I chased that dream, and
Nice.
I managed to tick that box as well.
Awesome.
Great. Just follow it up, and that's what I do now. I used to talk myself out of everything when I was a little younger. Now it's like, right, so I wanted to be a wrestler, done it. I thought, right, I want to be a scuba diver, so now I'm a rescue scuba diver as well.
That's awesome, man.
I wanted a Harley Davidson. I couldn't afford one, so I bought this cheap 125 motorcycle first of all. Saved, upgraded, bought a small Harley, upgraded, bought a bigger Harley, So it's just like, I think what it's about is just setting small goals for yourself, small, realistic, achievable goals, and just bang, smashing it out of the water. But I wish you every success, my friend. Just again, I'll say it again, just let's not talk ourselves out of anything. We deserve it, We deserve it.
No, be your best self, right? Just be. I remember reading in a book about just the definition, redefining success. And he says, one of the rest of the dying, he goes, I wish I lived a life true to myself instead of what others expected of me. So, why talk yourself out of it? Like,
exactly. Yeah, there's a
It's
lot to be said by that quote there. So where are you in terms of your coaching at the moment?
Yeah, right now, I've had a couple clients, and right now my current cash flow, I've partnered with a tutoring organization. So
Oh, excellent. Good.
that'll help kind of stabilize some cash flow while I focus on the bigger game. And yeah, I have a blog. I got certified in a tool called the Predictive Index to help people, build their business structure out well, and make sure they screen out bad hires, right? And then that they actually equip their people well once they get the right people on the bus. So there's a lot there. And yeah, so there's a couple early adopters I do a monthly book discussion that's gotten some good traction. So the best highlight for that, actually, I put it up on Eventbrite, and a lady from Australia actually registered for it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Well done, man. That's fantastic.
You reach across both ponds at this point, right?
Totally.
It's kind of like, man. So that was really cool, especially in a different time zone. You're just like, all right, 7 p.m. Central. Sure. If you can make it, great.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man.
So there's enough bright spots there, and enough, even as I'm still waiting to really land like some of the bigger fish that I'd like to sell. There's enough early interest there that, hey, that's like you said, right? Just keep chipping away. Let me start with a small motorcycle, then upgrade and upgrade and upgrade. Absolutely.
Exactly. That's the way forward, I think, man. You talked about your blog. Do you want to plug your blog now?
Yeah, sure. So my website is adaptingleaders.com. And so I've got some fun stuff on there. I read a lot of fun books, and I summarize them so you don't have to read it yourself, and just say, hey, just read Jerry's summary. If you want a higher level of engagement, I have a monthly book discussion I post on Eventbrite. And so then that's an opportunity for networking. I go through a summary, and then we have some facilitated discussions so people can really reflect on how they want to apply the material. And, if you want to work one-on-one with me, hey, just schedule a 30-minute call. It's completely free. There's no strings attached. I'm not going to sell you on anything. I'm not going to be like, hey, so now I have these products. It's like, no. This 30 minutes is for you. If that's what I'm selling, is just to say the value of coaching, and that's all you want, hey, I understand. Money's tight during COVID, man. You gotta.
No, tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Well, man, that's great. Well, your website, I'll put that in the video description and the audio description as well when this goes out. Sure. If there's anything else you want to plug or what have you, just ping me an email, and I'll add that to the descriptions for you as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you wanted to put out there, or have you covered it all?
I'll leave you guys with one last story, because this one is from a book I really like called The
Good, man.
Charisma Myth.
And we really like stories.
Good. Yeah. So this one's a lot of fun, just because I think whenever I've shared it, I've always amazed at just how people kind of pause and reflect on it. And so the story is this. With that book, they lead off with the example of Gladstone running against Disraeli for Prime Minister of England. Okay. And so they talk about this one woman in particular that they both were trying to court to get her vote for, right? And so the local newspaper interviews her, and they say, what did you think of Mr. Gladstone? And she goes, I thought he was the cleverest person in England. And they ask her, well, what did you think of your time with Mr. Disraeli? And she goes, well, I thought I was the cleverest person in England.
Speaks volumes.
Well, here's what's funny. The wrinkle is that some people thought Gladstone won. They're like, no, it's the Gladstone one, right? Because he's the cleverest person in England. He should be in office. And I'm just like, okay, I'm not, I can see why you'd say that. And I hope you check the history books, because so I love sharing that story. And I share that with every podcast host I can, because I just say, Caiman, thank you for making me feel like the cleverest person in England. It was a great discussion.
Excellent, my friend. Excellent. Well, it's been a genuine pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your stories. Thanks for taking us back through those horrific ordeals as well. And I'm glad to see you've got out on the other end and you're doing something positive with it. So massive well done to you. My glasses are off to you. Excellent.
Thanks, man. Keep it
Jimmy
up.
Fu, look after yourself. Take good care. Wish you all the best for the future. This has been the Caiman Show. Woohoo!